Welcome to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, a window into the soul of the North Fork of Long Island. We'll delve into the pulse of our community, its pressing issues, promising opportunities, and the rich stories that weave our shared history. I'm your host, Christopher Bianchi, and for episode 97, we sit down with Anne Marie and James Chubet, two incredibly talented musicians who share their unique musical journey from their early passion for music to meeting at Boston Conservatory. They built a remarkable career together. In this conversation, we'll hear about their deep connection to the North Fork, their experiences as performers, and what they love most about their profession. So I hope you enjoy episode 97 with Anne Marie and James Chubet. This episode was recorded August 30th, 2024. Thank you so much for coming on to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast today. I'm really looking forward to talking with you.
Us as well.
So could both of you give us a brief introduction separately of your journey into music as a child into college?
Sure. I grew up on Long Island, and I lived for 18 years in Syosset. And my parents were both musicians who taught and played, and I would hear music all the time. And they started me on piano, and I really didn't like the piano, and I begged them if I could play violin. Even though they were violinists themselves, they really were interested in me wanting to play piano. So I did start the violin, and I learned, unfortunately, in the beginning by ear. Fortunately and unfortunately, I guess, because learning by ear is a great skill. But my dad remarked one day that he noticed that I couldn't read music. So he sat me down at the kitchen table and started me on learning the basics of music theory and how to read music. And because what I was doing was I was copying all of the music that was coming out of their students, the studio. So that really started me on a whole different track of looking at the music and really seeing what was there. And when I went to school, I had no idea what profession I would do until high school, when I really, really sunk my teeth into music and realized I wanted to go to music school. And at the time, right at my graduation, I was accepted into music school, and I was so elated. I remember one day, and this kind of goes back to the name cottage, because my parents in 1968 bought a little cottage in Southold on Cedar Beach Creek. And I was riding my bicycle down the dirt road to the main road, and I suddenly felt so happy that I would be going to music school, and that my studies would be so intense in that discipline, rather than having to learn all of the things that I liked but didn't find as interesting as everything that went into being a musician.
Oh, wonderful. And then if you would like to...
I had a lot of music. There was a lot of music around the house, but it wasn't because my parents were musicians. They had many records of, I think my mother belonged to the Columbia Record Club in those days. And so there was always new Broadway show music, but a lot of Tchaikovsky and Brahms and Ravel. So I would hear it and I loved it. And I always, from a young age, would want to play a record and just keep, listening to things. But I went to a Catholic school. There was no music there, and sang a little bit. I was a choir boy for a period of time there. But coming into junior high school, our neighbors had an upright piano and had, I guess, the boy who was taking lessons, it wasn't interesting him, and they just asked if we'd like to have the piano. And my mother said, "Would you like to take piano lessons?" I said, "Absolutely." So, and those were the days there weren't electric keyboards yet. It came about when I was in high school, so it wasn't like you could just go buy an electric keyboard, which happens today a lot of the times before people will buy a piano. But so I just went at it. And luckily in high school, there was a very strong, I grew up in south of Boston in a suburb called Westwood, Norwood rather. I now live in the suburb called Westwood, but I practiced a lot. We had an amazing, I played in the jazz band. The director was fabulous. The choral director was fantastic. And I just kept auditioning for things and getting them and working harder at it, and realized I just really wanted to take this further and with me as a major. So,
did you both go to the New England Conservatory School?
We went to both music schools in Boston. Now the Boston Conservatory is part of Berkeley. At the time, it was called Boston Conservatory of Music. And then, we met there too. We met at the Boston Conservatory. And I went on to NEC to complete my undergraduate degree. Jim completed his.
I did my bachelor's at Boston Conservatory, and then I got 2 master's degrees, one in piano performance and one in musicology at the New England Conservatory. Okay. So we weren't at New England Conservatory at the same time, but we were at Boston Conservatory together. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I had one year at the Manhattan School too, in New York.
And was that a good experience there, and the environment in Boston for music?
It's very nurturing. It was very nurturing, and I believe it still is. Mm-hmm. I have students playing in NEC right now, and they're having a good time with their studies. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we might be jumping a bit here, but in terms of moving forward, you mentioned the connection with the North Fork and the cottage out here. And in terms of, could you give us a little history of how the cottage duo got started?
Let's see. Well,
first of all, actually,
we were married first before we ever played any music together, I think, right?
Yes, I think.
We had 2 chamber in college at Boston Conservatory. We were part of individual chamber groups, and sort of a little competition going on there between the groups at one point.
Yeah, that was funny. Yeah. But I think we may have played together before we were married, but
right, but
not much.
And actually, one of the pieces we're playing on the program Sunday was probably one of those pieces.
Yeah, the Prokofiev
Sonata, which we just took up again after many, many years. Anyway, it's great to be doing it again.
Well, the ensemble itself has had many iterations. Yeah. It started actually as a trio with my sister Jeannie, who plays in basically Baroque, and their concert is later in the fall. And so we play, and we are playing a concert here, hopefully next year, with her as the cottage trio. And our daughter, as Jim mentioned, she was part of the cottage quartet. And her husband, Eric, came and played for one of the concerts back when they were just first getting together. And so it was the cottage quintet. But recently we have played more as a duo. It's just been a little bit easier to get together in the last few years, but we'll be expanding again to include the other members, and hopefully maybe our grandson Walden may be able to play with us at some point.
Seems very talented.
Yeah, but we started playing here probably over 20 years ago, and during the time when there was a piano that was owned by Peter Serkin, and then that piano went back to the Serkins, I believe, and then there's a new one now, which is very nice to hear and play.
Yeah, which I've enjoyed playing this one as well. Yeah, the Peter Serkin piano was a style is very special. I think that was a lure for me. We have to play. I believe we talked to Poppy Johnson at the time. And So whenever that was, Poppy could never remember. We'd always say, "When did that start?" Never quite came up with it.
And so you've been coming at here for over 20...
I've been coming since 1968. Mm-hmm. And Jim came since
before we got married.
Yeah, before we got married. So it's been a very long time.
Yeah.
So as far as our careers go, we play and teach, and I'm a member of the faculty of Boston College and the All Newton Music School, and an orchestra in Western Massachusetts called the Springfield Symphony Orchestra, which draws its members from New York, Massachusetts, and the Pioneer Valley, the local area. And I played for 23 years in the Handel and Haydn Society Orchestra. And there's a lot of other things too, but that's mainly what I have done. Yeah.
And I have a large private piano studio. I am a church music director currently too, and I have been I just had my 20th anniversary there in Canton near Westwood. I was a member of the piano faculty at Boston College for 35 years, but I retired just a year ago from that position. And I was the principal keyboard for the Brit Festival Orchestra, which I also retired after 35 years. That was a very exciting time for me. It's a 3-week festival in Oregon. Anne Marie still plays out there. And I got a chance to play concertos as well as play a lot of chamber music and all the orchestral repertoire with them. And I do subs in the Springfield Symphony as well, and I played for them last year. So,
yeah. And kind of mentioned some of the projects that you've done throughout your career. Are there any memorable performances that you've done?
For me, I think it was the Ravel Piano Concerto with James DePriest conducting our orchestra in Oregon, which is where the Brit Festival is. He was the nephew of Marian Anderson, the soprano, and he guest conducted Boston Symphony, New York Philharmonic, and we had him as our conductor for a while. And just after a chamber music concert I played, I think it was, he just came up to me one night and said, "I think we should do something together." And I just about died. So it's like, so anyway, I thought I only had a year to get something ready. He'd let me pick what I wanted to play. And when I was a student out at Tanglewood for a year too in the early 70s, and I had purchased the Ravel Piano Concerto music, and I thought someday I'd love to play this, maybe I will, and that's what I chose. And it turned out I had 2 years to prepare basically for it because our daughter was born the next year, so we needed to take a leave that summer. Anyway, so that was a very exciting thing.
Yes.
And we've had lots of changes.
Yeah,
you go. You go. No.
But you had a whole other solo too.
Well, yeah, other solos, Gershwin, Rhapsody in Blue, and yeah.
And the other Rhapsody.
Yeah, the second Rhapsody as well. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, with Peter Bay, which was a wonderful conductor as well. So we had some wonderful experiences.
For me, it's mainly, I would say, my tours with the Handel and Haydn Society, where we toured in the California, LA area, and that was a very exciting time. And also to London with Roger Norrington with that group performing The Creation. I also played in Palermo, Sicily for a couple of weeks at the Scarlatti Festival.
I was thinking too how we did the competition in Florence in the early 80s. There was a period there where we were, I think, we had a trip that involved doing this competition in Florence. And then we went to visit friends who were playing for the Opera House in Barcelona, auditioned for the conductor and got a job there, and debated for a year, should we make a move at this point in time? We decided not to. Things were starting to happen in Boston, so we decided not to do that. And so there was Florence and then Barcelona, and we ended in Reykjavik, Iceland, where we had a friend who set up a concert for us, and that was wonderful. So, yeah, fun time.
And I also was curious, with your time teaching within music school, and even going to music school, I don't know if you wanted to talk about how has it changed in some ways, and with teaching younger students, obviously you're in that environment, but what advice might you give to people in that field? Do you see it as more challenging now getting into that field than?
I think forever and always, what you have to do is think of yourself as doing only that, and that you cannot do anything else.
It has to be that.
It has to be, this is your plan, this is what you're... I mean, you can't imagine yourself sitting at a desk. You can't imagine yourself, doing other things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it has to be that much of a drive. It doesn't work unless you have that drive. And so that's good for the beginning of time. I think for people who want to be musicians, it's never been easy, although, it's in Europe, I guess you get a little bit more funding, and it's, state funded, your jobs, etc. But still, it's always been competitive. It's possible it may be more competitive. I suppose it is.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, if you have that drive, the competition, you can handle it.
Yes.
I do sometimes think it was easier for us when we started out because there were so many opportunities, and perhaps there aren't quite as many opportunities as there were now.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a hard thing to encourage someone to do it. But what Anne-Marie said is absolutely true. So when things happen, still for people. We have a good group of friends that we met at Boston Conservatory in the 70s, and we're starting to do a reunion every year. So we still see them, and a lot of them some of them are still playing and doing things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I've also, not to get off track, but
Sure.
I did more studio arts as my undergrad, but I think it's always you want to kind of go for what you're passionate about, but then even whether it's the economy or tuition and how to make a living after that is always a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, we did not get any direction in that way as undergraduates, but now I believe there are all kinds of courses in music school that helps students to figure that out.
I think when we got out, it was like, now what? Because there wasn't that preparation. There is more preparation now. For possibilities and things. So that's very good.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say it's still not incredibly difficult, but
And also, in terms of the North Fork, I was just curious what you enjoy most about coming out here, and I've been coming out here this whole time, and what you enjoy about the area.
Well, I really enjoy how it connects to New England, because I'm obviously, or maybe not so obviously, I moved from Long Island to the Boston area, and I wanted to do that because I really love New England, and keeping the connection with Long Island through the North Fork is really a beautiful thing, because it's so connected to our history in New England, and also the architecture and the history.
When I first came out here was in the late 1970s, and I had grown up going to Cape Cod in the summertime, and I was seeing more and more that it was getting more and more commercial, and that you'd come to the North Fork, especially in 1977, some of that area. It did feel more like Cape Cod had felt to me growing up than it was feeling at that point. And of course, things became more commercialized in a sense here on the North Fork, but it still has a special, very special feeling that I spent a lot of time in Cape Cod this summer, and I enjoyed it, but I thought, I still feel like closer to the North Fork. The vibe or whatever. Yeah, it's very different than it was.
Even though the North, obviously Cape Cod has changed and the North Fork has changed, but you think even with just the character of the area out here with the farmland, and it's been able to hold on to some more of that.
It has.
That's right.
And I think there's a lot going on to keep it that way that I don't really have any, major knowledge of, but it just seems as though the character is very important to everyone who lives here.
Yes. I think I just had one or two other questions. You mentioned working possibly you do the cottage duo, the cottage trio, the quartet. But do you have any other projects coming up or performances that you're particularly excited about? I know you mentioned it might not be until maybe next year.
Yeah.
For that, but the orchestra season hasn't even started yet. I think my first concert is at the end of September, and there are lots of concerts that I always look forward to, and many different programs with the groups that I play in. Nothing stands out particularly. I guess I really do enjoy working with the conductor, Joanne Folletta. It's just one concert after the other, and they're all wonderful. I play a Messiah at Trinity Church every year in Boston. Trinity Church is that big, iconic church right near the end of the Boston Marathon line that it's always in view of the cameras there where the library is, the Boston Public Library. And that's always a highlight of my season.
And this past June, I at the All Newton Music School, I have a piano duo partner. We've done a lot of two piano and four hand work. I think it was the former director who came up with the idea of, there is a lot of music written for people at two pianos. So, and we hadn't done a whole lot of that. I've done a little bit, but she thought we should do a whole big concert of that. And the current director thought it was a great idea as well. So Kevin and I, who are the seasoned members of the faculty, we were called, I remember, by Evan, with two of the newer pianists, very, very talented pianists, got together and did a concert for two pianos and 4 people at two pianos. Although we also played two piano works for two pianists. And one work was for one piano with 4 of us sitting at one piano, which was a lot of fun to play. Anyway, so it had a great response. So we're going to do another one this year. So I'm looking forward to collaborating again on that different program. Yeah.
Yes. And just lastly, I just had another question. Just looking back over your career and being able to continue with your passion in playing music, what do you enjoy the most about your experience with continuing to play? And just, there's people say that not that it's not a career, but just a passion that you can continue to hear and feel and produce music or continue to play music and then hopefully continue throughout the rest of your life. Just that idea of your enjoyment most out of the idea of playing these instruments and looking back on that time period.
I just would say, there are times where I feel like, this takes too much time, all this practice, all this, and maybe I don't want to play the piano anymore, but it doesn't last very long. And, there was a lot of times working out your technique, etc. And anyway, you get to a point where you do feel like you have a lot of knowledge and it just feels like after all that work, I don't want to put that away. Plus the satisfaction of it is, I can't imagine anything else would give me the same kind of satisfaction. Playing with Anne-Marie, our duos is certainly a huge part of that. And all the different kinds of things we can do. I don't know if it means too much to me. And I hope I'll never have to give it up. Let's put it that way. So,
yes,
because I do feel like I have a lot to say now. So,
yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
All the experience and music that is within us at this time, we've played a lot of music and it's that all that stuff is there still.
And you draw on it.
And you draw on it.
And we have a 3-year-old grandson who loves to learn the violin and the piano. So we'll see what happens there.
Guitar and everything. And
his dad's a really one.
Yeah, it's just not. It's not in the cards to retire from playing.
Right.
It's like it. And the thing is, too, though, one has to realize it is a job and it is work, and you do go to work and you do your work, and it is hard work. It's not just fulfilling your passion. It's, it's work. Yeah. And so
but we both love to teach too, and that still satisfies you on another level. But yes, it is also very, very hard work. So, yeah. So I've cut back things though at this point, but I'm sticking to things. So it gives me more time to do more things I want to do now, but musically.
Yeah.
No, I think that's good. But I'll say I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on today and share your story. And it's really lovely to continue to have you come out to the North Fork and play here for all these years now.
Yeah, it's
Thanks,
great
Chris.
for us
That's
too.
really great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 97 with Anne Marie and James Chubet. I want to thank you for listening to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, and we'll see you next time.